Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello Jr.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perrin.
We are right in the middle of what we lovingly call con season. You may have been at PaizoCon with me a couple of weeks ago. You may right now be at San Diego Comic-Con. Or, like most gamers, you might be looking forward to the best 4 days in gaming that's coming up in 3 weeks, GenCon. To remind us just how awesome GenCon can be, we have GenCon's event programming manager, Mr. Derek Guder. Derek, welcome to the show.
Hey there, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
You know, it's a little bit busy.
I can imagine.
I usually begin planning my GenCon immediately after GenCon ends. How far in advance do you guys plan GenCons?
Depends on the part. I mean, like, there's definitely stuff for future years that we've already been planning. Some of the really big key elements like space and hotel box and stuff like that, a lot of the foundation of the show is nailed down before any given year is over. So there's already been some initial talks about what we'll be doing in 2015 and stuff like that.
Okay, cool.
Now, we all kind of, as attendees, just want the next 3 weeks to disappear and GenCon to happen tomorrow. How would you feel about that, Derek?
I would not like that. I would actually like a couple more weeks maybe just to spread things out a little bit. I mean, there's always just a million things that come up at the last minute. Even with we have a long lead time even for events. Event submission opens in January, and so I've been neck deep in events for 6 months or so. And even then, there's still a ton of things that come up at the last minute that we're trying to fit in. People who are just now submitting stuff, or an event was sold out and now we need to figure out where to move it, or trying to finalize equipment and stuff like that. So a little bit more time was always helpful.
Now, for any listeners tuning in that aren't quite sure what a GenCon is, can you give them the 30-second elevator pitch?
Sure. Well, I mean, GenCon is basically the best 4 days in gaming. It's 50,000, 60,000 people descending in Indianapolis for about a week or so. The show itself is officially 4 days, but people will be playing games and taking over all of Indianapolis for every kind of game you can imagine. Mainly tabletop, but pretty much anything happens there.
And you are one of the event managers for GenCon?
Yeah, there's 2 people on the events team. There's myself and my boss, and the way the responsibilities end up breaking up is she handles guests and seminars and workshops and artists and entertainment events, a lot of the audience kind of events, a lot of the big events. And then my responsibilities are pretty much any games, anime, film, all kinds of games. So pretty much everything that you see in the main event hall ends up going through me.
So, can you tell us roughly how many events are scheduled at GenCon this year?
I can tell you exactly. So currently, there are 12,501 active events, and I would say that there are a couple thousand more events that are still pending or canceled or something like that. I think we're at 14,200 something events in the system in one way or the other.
Oh my goodness. Now,
Name them all.
I take it that there is zero probability of anybody getting even a measurable fraction of that in their schedule.
Oh yeah, no, it's not going to happen. I mean, that's the thing is a lot of people will contact me and be like, hey, I want to run an event at GenCon and I want to make sure it doesn't overlap with any major event. And my answer is just like, nope, stop worrying about that. Just figure out what fits your schedule, figure out what you think fits the schedule of the players you want to get, and just go with it. Because anybody who tries to schedule something at GenCon that doesn't conflict with something else, I mean, even at 3 in the morning, it's not going to happen.
So events go on through, all night?
Yeah. The show officially starts at 8 a.m. on Thursday and runs all the way until 4 p.m. on Sunday. I mean, obviously, you're going to have a lot fewer things, but if you just want to play something at 4 in the morning, you can go play Magic. Magic runs 24 hours. There's a PC gaming area that will be open 24 hours this year. I guarantee you that you'll walk through the halls and stumble into some group playing Are You a Werewolf or something like that. So there's a game happening non-stop, basically.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the PC gaming?
Yeah, so the past couple of years we've had the eGame Arena, which is the console area. I think a year or two ago, we added arcade machines, and this year we're having PC games come back through, I believe, I think the name is eBash. It's a local chain of like internet cafe type places, I believe, and they're bringing a bunch of machines for League of Legends and Hearthstone and that kind of stuff. I think they're running 24 hours a day, and they have a couple scheduled tournaments. They also have like King of the Hill stuff where you can come and just play against whoever shows up and stuff like that. And they also just have hourly times that you can sign up and play.
See, now this just kind of goes to show how big GenCon is, because you're talking about how it's been growing every year. And this is my 4th consecutive GenCon. I had no idea any of that was happening.
Mm-hmm. It'll make you feel even better to realize that it's right across from the exhibit hall. So you probably walked by it about 10 times a day.
Probably. Yeah, I'm like Ryan.
Go, Param.
Oh, I was just adding to that. I mean, like Ryan, this will be my 6th or 7th consecutive Gen Con, and every single year it's just like, I didn't know this was there. When did they put this gigantic dungeon in the side of Gen Con?
Mm-hmm.
And why are all these people playing Star Trek in really awesome chairs?
Yep. That's I'm assuming you're talking about True Dungeon, which a lot of people know about. And then there's also I think it sounds like you were just talking about Artemis, which is the Starship Bridge Simulator, which it's on Steam and stuff like that. But the company brings like special like captain's chairs and they kind of set up like a little area so you can walk onto your bridge and then run the game. I think they also have GM sessions this year where you can do your thing and they'll have somebody behind the scenes who is kind of actively tweaking the scenario as you play through it. I think they're also renting outfits too. Like you can go get the red shirt or the yellow shirt or something like that.
That is awesome. All right, I gotta get on. Well, I gotta get on True Dungeon first, and then sometime I gotta get on this Artemis now. There's just too much cool that's happening. So, all right.
Welcome to Gen Con.
Let's stay focusing on the size then, because Gen Con can kind of be looked at as several tabletop gaming conventions that have Voltroned into a giant mechacon.
Mm-hmm.
So you've already said that no one can see it all, but how do you make it more like a gaming buffet and less like you're always trying to chase down the hors d'oeuvres at a wedding?
Well, so the way that I recommended, or the way that I always do it whenever I go to say Origins or something like that, or when I used to go to Gen Con, is I am brutally picky about what I care about. So like I'll download the Excel file, which we have all the events listed in, and then I will just go through it with a hatchet and say I care about this game, I don't care about this game, and just pare it down to my essentials. And then those essentials will basically be about 6 people's worth of a schedule over the weekend. So then when event registration opened up in May, people had the ability to kind of put together wish lists. So you build a wish list, you kind of put all the things that you might want into the wish list, and you submit that, and you kind of see what you get back. What still has space when you get to your line and queue. And that'll answer, once you figure out what's already sold out, that tends to answer some of your basic stuff, and then you figure out, how much can actually fit in, and my advice for people is, unless you are like an old hand at a convention, unless you know exactly where you want to go at what time, I recommend not scheduling more than, say, 8 hours of games a day. So that's basically, 2 RPG sessions a day or something like that. Because that gives you plenty of time to still wander the show, go to the exhibit hall, bounce off something new and interesting that you found, and it doesn't make you feel like you have to stick to a schedule that you made 6 months ago.
And when you say essentials, where does sleep fit in on that?
It depends on how old you are, because now I think my sleep threshold is a little higher than it used to be. But yeah, like you definitely want to get, I would say, at least 4 hours of sleep a night. My recommendation is to plan for 8, because you're going to end up staying up late laughing with somebody in your hotel room for 3 hours anyway, so then you can still get 5.
Yeah, last year I roomed with a parent, and it felt like he was sleeping for 8 hours a day, which seemed absurd, but it ended up that was one of his favorite parts about going to Gen Con, and he loved all the gaming that he also got to do at Gen Con.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you pick the games you care about. Now, we are No Direction, a Pathfinder-focused game podcast, so we can pretty much tell one of the games our listeners care about. So, for Pathfinder and Paizo enthusiasts, what do they have to look forward to?
Well, I mean, obviously there's going to be a huge room for Pathfinder. Paizo itself is basically taking up the bulk of the Sagamore Ballroom, which is on the second floor, right above registration. So it's impossible to miss, basically. You go up there and it's going to just be full of people playing Pathfinder all weekend long. So if you just want to show up and just play Pathfinder, you can camp out there and never leave, and fill every waking moment with Pathfinder. They've got a bunch of stuff. You can go through the schedule and see what still has tickets. But some of the big key events, they've got 2 Pathfinder specials, and you guys actually are probably going to know the details of these way better than I am, because going through 14,000 events, all of it kind of blurs together for me. But it looks like there's the conclusion to season 6 of Pathfinder Society, and season 5, and then the kickoff to season 6. Both of those are set to 900 players each, and they're currently sold out. So chances are you're going to have just shy of 1,000 people playing the same Pathfinder scenario at the same time, 2 nights at GenCon. They also have the convention exclusive, the Ruins of Bone Keep, level 3. That's just shy of 600 people. That's on Saturday night. So that's going to be another big batch of people. I think that one still has a couple tickets available to it, so people can still snatch that up.
And that's a great way to retire a character. That's the point of Bone Keep, to kill you.
Okay. All right. Well, then apparently a whole bunch of people are going to rise to that occasion. The other big Pathfinder stuff I know is that the Pathfinder adventure card game OP, I believe, is launching at GenCon. So there's a separate room, 232, I think it's 232, that is set aside just for the Pathfinder adventure card game. And there's a bunch of events in there that are all sold out as well. So that's going to be full. If you want to try to stop by, see if you can squeeze in, you certainly can. The only catch there that I understand is that you need to come with your own ready prepared class deck. So I guess that's how the OP is being run.
And that's fine. You can buy those class decks. It's a prearranged character, so you don't have to. It's not like you have to build a magic deck.
Yeah, I think they're coming out at GenCon, so you can pick them up in the exhibit hall.
Now, you were saying that Paizo's got the majority of the Sagamore Ballroom. How does the space this year compare to last year?
Compared to last year, it's basically 30% bigger than what they had last year, 33% bigger. Because last year, I believe they had 1 through 4 or something like that. This year, they have 3 through 7.
That's kind of crazy, because last year we could already see the curvature of the Earth from one end to the other.
Yep, that's the beauty of the Sagamore.
And I know last year they also had a separate room for kids and family play. Is that something they're doing again this year?
No, so those events are in the Sagamore now. That room is being used for the adventure card game. So basically those intro events, I think all the Weeby Goblins and stuff like that, that's all going to be in the main Sagamore space.
We do have a question from our chat. Oh, Herm, you go ahead.
Go for the question.
Okay. Scott Werner says he loved the food trucks last year. Will they be back this year?
Yep, they'll be back. I don't know the exact schedule. That's something that's coordinated by Visit Indy, but I do know that it's going to be back. It's also worth noting that the Westin across the street, kind of around the corner from where the other food trucks were, they had some food trucks set up in their parking lot as well as a separate thing. So, I mean, I guess basically the lesson you want to learn here is walk around a bit and check stuff out, because the food trucks are very popular, so I wouldn't be surprised if you'll find a couple food trucks squatting in different locations around the city. I think I found a cupcake food truck on the way to Monument Circle one day.
Like designer cupcakes?
Yeah, and it was just, you need a hit of a cupcake fast. Here you go.
Let's talk about Indianapolis then, because one thing that really impressed me for GenCon was just how gung-ho Indianapolis was for the gamers. So how much of that is just by Indie's own initiative, and how much is GenCon coordinating that?
Well, we certainly reach out to we certainly reach out to Indianapolis, but a lot of it is the city really taking the initiative to get involved. I think it's a combination of the Visitors Bureau for Indianapolis, just Indy, I think, visitindy.org. It's a combination of them really wanting to make the city welcoming, and I think also a lot of the businesses around Indianapolis over the past 10 years, 12, 11 years, whatever it's been, have really seen the impact that attendees have on the city while they're there. So it's definitely a case of, a lot of them just seeing how much demand and how much of an impact attendees have and embracing that on their own. I think the example the Rams set with the art that they had, the custom menus, they're really trying to get into the atmosphere and make it feeling like a gamer hobbit hole over the course of the weekend. All the other businesses saw how well the Ram did before doing that and realized how much it would benefit them to, be as embracing as well.
Person sitting next to the safe being able to open.
Is it in time Indianapolis just installs a permanent true dungeon?
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see if he can find space for it.
We were talking about the families that would be playing Pathfinder games, but what about just families in general? What is there to do that may be less gamer geared? So if you're bringing your family, your significant other.
Well, there's actually an entire programming track called SPA, which is basically spousal activities or whatnot, and it's kind of a nebulous line there between what's a SPA event versus, say, what's a workshop or something like that. But the general kind of thing that I say is these are all events that might or might not be of interest to gamers, but aren't necessarily gamer related. So it's stuff like tours of Indianapolis or beer tasting, wine tasting, a brewery class, class on how to make sushi. Things that certainly could hit a lot of gamer interest, but it's not quite as gamer focused as, say, chainmail teddy bears or something like that. So that's kind of where the line between workshop and SPA is. Sometimes it's a little nebulous. But then, in addition to that, which SPA events go all weekend. In addition to that, there's also the Family Fun Day on Sunday, where there's a much cheaper badge price for families to get in. There's a ton of events that happen in the training grounds, in the exhibit hall, in the Family Fun Pavilion, and stuff like that. So it's a great time to basically bring your family and wander around and just kind of soak in the exhibit hall and everything like that.
Now, I'm leaving Indy on Monday. Are there any planned events, or should I just kind of look over the SPA events as a guide for things I can do on Monday?
So there's no official GenCon events after 4 p.m. on Sunday. So all the SPA events are during the show. There's nothing that we coordinate officially after 4 p.m. on Sunday. You could certainly get some inspiration on what to do afterward. But I think in most cases people are going to be recovering on Monday and then traveling. So it's up to you as to how ambitious you want to be with getting up and out on a Monday morning.
Now, you mentioned the Family Fun Day on Sunday, which is way too much of a tongue twister for me to say 3 times fast. But how many? Usually, most gamers I see going to Gen Con plan for the full week-long sprawl. Do you get a lot of people that are just there for a day, or people that just show up without planning?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Family Fun Day stuff is a lot of the appeal of that day is to people who live in the area, who are more casual gamers, or who just like the spectacle, and they'll come through on Sunday because they don't have to plan a hotel room or a flight or anything like that, and they'll bring their kids. Or it could just be parents whose kids really like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic or anything else, and they bring the kids so the kid can experience everything, and they walk around with them. There's definitely thousands of people who are going to go do that and come through just on Sunday.
And you also mentioned chainmail teddy bears earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other noteworthy events that have come across your desk?
So actually, I think that was the one question I didn't prepare for.
No.
Yeah, I was all researching the Pathfinder stuff for you. Then you had to throw me a curveball. What I would say is one of the easy ways to do that is again, there's 14,000 events. So honestly, for me to remember events that I thought were cool is just really hard. but there's an option in the event catalog, especially if you download the Excel file, for what's it's called GenCon Presents events, and those are just events that we thought were neat when we were going through event placement or review or whatever else. And there's still hundreds and hundreds of those events, but looking at some of those, like some of the ones that I've been spending a lot of time on are we have a concert room on the second floor this year, and the Double Clicks are a great sister act that play the guitar and the cello, but I think their event is actually sold out. Molly Lewis is a ukulele player who does some really fantastic stuff. She is not sold out yet, so I would definitely recommend getting a ticket to that. I think all the other musical acts are going to be great. Just trying to think of really good stuff. There's like Seven Wonders tournaments, Catan tournaments. Trying to find stuff that isn't sold out and is really, really noteworthy and isn't Pathfinder related. There's My Little Pony Paint Your Own Pony workshops, where you get a blank pony and you get to paint it into your own horrible view of My Little Pony. There's actually two. Did we lose them? Yeah, I think there's two tournaments in the e-game arena that I think are particularly exciting. Nidhogg and Towerfall. If you guys haven't played either of those games,
okay,
Nidhogg and Towerfall are absolutely fantastic, like local competitive games.
Mm-hmm.
They're both on PS4, I think. There's a ton of stuff. It's impossible for me to sort it down. There's lots of interesting seminars and panels and stuff like that too. A lot of the stuff that I end up finding really compelling are kind of smaller RPGs and stuff like that too.
Now, you mentioned getting tickets and registering for these events. Now, we're a few weeks before GenCon, so online registration has officially stopped. So gamers that are interested in... Huh?
Nope, online registration is actually still open.
Oh, wow.
The only thing that has stopped is that you can't have stuff mailed to you anymore. So the ship to me option is closed, but people absolutely can still get tickets to stuff, and I certainly recommend it because it means that much less time you have to deal with, waiting in line and finding out that things were sold out anyway. So you can still buy tickets. You just have to then go pick them up at will call on site. And online registration will be open through the entire show. So even in the middle of the show, you can bring out your smartphone, hop over to GenCon.com. Buy some tickets, and then you can go pick up those tickets 2 hours later at will call. So you can't register for something you need to go to right now, but if you're like in the morning, you're like, oh, I want to go to this cool event in the afternoon, you can buy those tickets online.
That sounds much more preferable than filling out those little forms.
Yeah, I figure in most cases it's going to be. You just have to plan ahead a little bit.
Speaking of ridiculous numbers of events, the program guide that you guys give out during the things, it's like I'm going to say small encyclopedia.
Yeah, it's 350 pages, 360 pages. More than half of which is the event charts, and again, the event charts only, I think we get 9,600 events in there, so that's another 3,000 events, 4,000 events that don't make it into the book.
Oh, goodness.
Going back to some advice you might have for a Gen Con attendee, I remember the first day of my Gen Con, I'd spent all my money before I even reached Artist Alley. So what are your tips for attendees that feel the need to pace their spending? Okay,
well, so the way that I do is I can get through the exhibit hall super, super fast. The key is be picky as you absolutely can be. Be a big picky bastard, and it's a lot easier. But the way that I do it is I run through the exhibit hall and stop as little as you can. Just go through, check out all the booths, and see everything first. If there's anything that you think you might want to buy, just take a note. I have like a note on my phone or something like that, or you can write it down. So just take a note of things that you might be interested in buying. And once you have completed your circuit, maybe that over lunch or over dinner, you can consider like, hey, what do I actually want to get? What's in my budget? Can I get this later? What can I buy now and play with my friends at the show? Things like that. The only exceptions that I make are for things that I know are in limited quantity, and I know I want to get. Like, there are certain games or there are certain supplements or something like that I'm just going to get. So, and I know it's going to be in high demand, so I might grab those. But otherwise, do the full circuit. Engage as little as possible, basically. Just check stuff out, get the high points, make a list, and then go through the list later, figure out what you actually want to get and do, and then go back to the exhibit hall again. And on that run, you can go through and you can buy stuff, and you can be a little more leisurely, and you can find some surprises that maybe you didn't notice the first time, but going through at least once, make sure that you don't completely miss anything.
So what other basic...
Go for it, Pam.
So what other basic prep do you recommend for first-time con goers to sort of get through the con besides registration and sleep and such? But what other basic prep work can help you survive 4 days of this madness? Yeah,
I mean, there's the basic stuff of sleeping, showering, eating. Like, do not forget to do those 3 things. If you forget to do those, you're going to ruin it for yourself and the people around you. So aside from that, my advice is, first of all, relax, because it's going to be fun, so it's okay. You're probably going to have 1 or 2 events that don't go the way you want. There's probably going to be a bunch of times that you plan to meet up with your friends that didn't work out, so just let that slide and don't worry about it. Make sure that you have, figure out how you're going to communicate with your friends, for one. Is everybody going to be texting each other? Do you have a group chat? You're going to use some other sort of messaging service or something like that. So figure out how you're going to chat with your friends, but definitely play it by the seat of your pants as much as you can. I think otherwise, maybe like my big suggestion would be to pack light. So don't bring all of your rule books, don't bring all of your stuff. Bring dice and a couple pencils, and only bring a rule book if you know you are going to run that game. Otherwise, I can guarantee that no one is going to be happy when you sit down at your table and take out a pack of 6 books and put them on the table. So, you don't need it. You'll have fun. It's fine.
Along similar lines, I've never left a Gen Con with the same number of T-shirts as I showed up. Sometimes I'll double it. So if that's an issue, then you know what? At the very least, if you're running out of T-shirts by the end of the weekend, someone is giving a promotional T-shirt away somewhere.
Yeah. I do want to say that I have to bring up her YouTube channel. But my girlfriend, who lives in Ireland, did a series of like how-to Gen Con, and she's got a couple different like what she recommends having in a bag and things like that. And she's this is her 3rd show, I think. So she's kind of got a new perspective of what you might want to bring. So if people want to check those out, they're on YouTube. Her username is 87Nellybell, Nellybelle. And she's got a couple videos that people might find helpful.
Does she mention any good tips for actual bags to have? Because I know I usually leave Gen Con with a crick in my back or my shoulders, my neck.
I don't think so. I mean, my advice there is small. The only time that you should really be carrying around a whole lot of stuff is when you buy a bunch of shit at the exhibit hall, and then what you probably want to do is find some place to sit down, sort it out, bring it back to your hotel room, things like that.
Now, every year, you know what, we're actually running close to the end of your time, so let's cut out that question and say, finish this sentence. Your Gen Con 2014 experience would not be complete without blank.
Oh, boy. I guess the exhibit hall? Yeah, I mean, I guess it just wouldn't quite feel the same without walking the exhibit hall. But yeah, like Gen Con's a very weird thing for me. I realized the other day that just looking at maps of downtown Indianapolis have started making me feel homesick. Just because I every year, once a year, I spend like 2 weeks there, and I just run everywhere. So yeah, it's a little crazy.
Now, let's say our listeners are showing up at Gen Con. It's Thursday morning. Where do they need to be?
So if they're just showing up at Gen Con on Thursday morning, they probably want to have somebody check into their hotel room, for one. And then everybody else should probably go to Will Call and start picking up their badges, because I hope that they all planned ahead and bought badges and don't have to wait an on-site reg. I mean, the line will move quickly, but it's going to be much easier if you spent the ride down buying all your stuff online. So yeah, I mean, you're going to go to Reg, you're going to pick up your stuff at Will Call, and then you're going to go to whatever schedule of events you have. And if you don't have events that are scheduled, then start wandering. Walk down the hallway, look inside the rooms, find out that there's a PC gaming area, stuff like that.
Derek, I think it's time that we have to say goodbye to you, unfortunately. I think we could have gone on for a little bit longer, but I know that you're a busy guy, especially this time of year. So we just want to thank you for joining us. Mm-hmm. And if there's any last-minute thing you would like to plug, go ahead.
I mean, I guess, why don't I give a quick rundown? There were a couple other Pathfinder or D&D 3.5 events that had still tickets available that I thought your attendees might be, or your listeners might be interested in. So first, there's Nazcrag, which is kind of a long-running RPG tournament. It's like a role-playing tournament thing. They run a whole bunch of events, a couple charity events, but they're a very long-running event at the show, and they still have some tickets available, and I'm pretty sure they're running Pathfinder. Legend of the Shining Jewel is a ongoing campaign that uses Pathfinder at its base. I want to say it's like a Victorian era kind of thing, but I'm not entirely sure. I haven't actually played through the stuff. There's also Castles and Chemo, which I believe has one Pathfinder event, and that is a kind of like a slightly premier event where the proceeds are going to go to benefit cancer research. So it's kind of a neat idea. He's running versions of it in pretty much, I think, just about every version of D&D. And then finally, there's some events that are run by a buddy of mine who makes these big interactive touchscreen tables. And he has some dungeon crawl events. The company name is Mesa Mundi, and he has some dungeon crawl events that will be on these tables. And they'll be set up in the Marriott and the JW Marriott lobbies. And it's basically, I think it's all run on the table through one of the online D20 things. It might be D20 Pro, I think it is. So it's run through that, and I believe it's using the Pathfinder or the D&D 3.5 rules. And he'll have those set up in the lobbies for people to come check out. So that should be pretty neat for people too.
And just for the sake of the show notes, what was the name of the company for the touchscreen dungeon crawls?
Mesa Mundi. MESA, MUNDI, 2 words.
Cool, thank you. I heard Mason Windu, and I thought that he was being clever, but no, it's completely different.
No, I think that there's perhaps your bias showing there.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us, Derek.
Sure. If you guys see anything else, let me know.
Yeah, for sure. Take care. And we will be right back to finally answer your questions right after this. In the No Questions segment, we take your questions that you ask us in a variety of ways. We try to answer them to the best of our abilities. It could be rules questions, news questions, personal preferences, whatever you have on your mind, you can let us know. Param, how can they do that?
Okay. Well, there's a few ways you can ask us questions. You can go to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/nodirection, and leave your question there. Please preface it with no question before you ask the question, so we know that you mean it for the show. Secondly, you can email us at nodirection@hotmail.com, and that'll get the question in. You can, if you're watching the show live, you can ask questions right now by just putting the question in the YouTube comments, and we will try to get to those as we can. The really big, complicated questions that need a lot of research, probably best to send those in advance, because sometimes you'll stump us. Oftentimes you stump us, and that's not good. Well, stump us when you have like 5 minutes to answer it. The forums are currently down as of this recording, but we will have those up, and then you can just click on the forums link on our website. And speaking of websites, we have a brand new website, and part of that website is a comment section. So if you have a question for us on any given show or article, or just a follow-up on any topic we're giving, just go ahead and comment there, and even if you put no question in front of the comment, we know that that's also meant for the show.
Our first no question is actually more of a no answer. It comes from Sarah Bull, who is our She's an enthusiast of the Pathfinder adventure card game, and so she had a follow-up to what we talked about in No Direction 88 about the adventure card game. She says Ellinger why he chose Skull and Shackles. He explained that he chose an adventure path as far away from Rise of the Runelords, which was the first set, and that same thinking is why they went with Wrath of the Righteous as the next one. And so she kind of invites us to rampantly speculate which adventure path is the furthest from Wrath of the Righteous without retreading the Rise of the Runelords or Skull and Shackles feel that the next adventure path following Wrath of the Righteous might be based on. She suggests Mummy's Mask. What are your thoughts, Pam?
I offered that Reign of Winter would be the furthest away from Wrath of the Righteous of the stuff that's still available.
Reign of Winter. Okay, I can see that. I was thinking along similar lines. I was thinking Jade Regent. And I say it's along similar lines because there is the Crossing the North, and so as far as the adventure card game goes, it's a lot of like visiting locales and dynamic movement around. And if Skull and Shackles is any indication, each set will kind of have a different type of movement, and so this one will be a journey type thing. So possibly you have to do 3 sets crossing the Crown of the World, and then 3 sets in Tianxia.
You crossing the Crown of the World, and mine, you're crossing entire universes.
True, yes.
And who needs a flimsy little pirate ship when you can have Baba Yaga's chicken hut?
But really, thinking about it, most of the adventure paths have a very different feel, so I don't even think there is a wrong answer for this. We've been saying Kingmaker for a while, and Kingmaker still kind of qualifies as fairly different from everything else that's out there, both in terms of setting and mechanics, like a core mechanic that could completely change the game. Yeah, really, it's hard to narrow down. For whatever reason, I'm narrowing it down to Jade Regent.
Mm-hmm. Mummy's Mask is a good answer, too, because thematically it's very much not traditional fantasy, and that same thing could go for Legacy of Fire. And really, that's about it. That's the only other pure, not traditional fantasy one I can think of, because others is Carrying Crown is also a really distinctive one, but that's more horror fantasy. Though that could definitely also draw some appeal. So really, you can't go wrong. I mean, the only time you would go very, very similar is if you went Rise of the Runelords, then Crimson Throne, then all the ones based on Varesia. Yeah.
What about Council of Thieves? That's pretty different from traditional fantasy. That's a very European, aristocratic, very diplomatic and nobility setting. I'm curious if they even could pull that off as a card game.
Well, yeah. I also do put forth that that's probably not one of their most well-received adventure paths, so I don't know if that would be one they would go for.
I'd never heard that. I thought it was pretty well received.
I have no evidence to back up my assertions other than anecdotal.
Nor do I.
Not one we hear about often.
Sarah Bull agrees that Raid of Winter is a good choice, and Jade Regent. She's just happy about anything card related. She's in chat, I should mention.
Do you think they'll follow the pattern with the APs themselves, where they'll pick one that's obviously fantasy and one that's a little out there, and then one that's obviously fantasy and then one that's a little bit out there?
No, I don't think they need to restrict themselves in the same way as the role-playing game, because the role-playing game is a fantasy role-playing game, whereas the card game is an adventure card game. Mm-hmm. And so, if you go to your gaming store and you're just looking for an adventure card game, you're not so stuck on the idea of fantasy. And there's plenty of other things with a fantasy setting out there. Whereas if you go with something like Reign of Winter, that's not like any other game that's currently out there. So that would really stand apart from the other things on the gaming shelf. What's our next question, Baron?
Moving on. Jonathan Koenig via Facebook.com/NoDirection asks you something. As a venture officer, what do you encourage to promote society play? What relationship do you have with the stores? Do you have any recommendations for how to organize game days or even small conventions?
Well, let's see. Let's do that one thing at a time. What do I do to encourage and promote society? Society play starts with the GMs. So do everything you can to increase the number of GMs in your area. I ran GMing Run 01. We started the Game Masters Get More reward program at Chimera Games. And yeah, basically anytime anyone says like, oh, I'm interested in playing, I'm like, have you considered running? And anytime someone says, I'm considering running, I just grab them by the collar and say, do it! Because
I recommend not assaulting potential volunteers.
oh, I didn't think of that. That's a good tactic I should try, Param, not assaulting people. But no, seriously, that's definitely, you'll always be able to find more players, and people will give it a try here and there. But someone that's willing to GM is a very special kind of animal, and it also shows it's a different level of engagement, because people can just try a game here and there as a player, whereas you really do have to be committed to learning rules, learning the setting, buying an adventure. All these things show that a GM is someone that they're maybe not a lifer, but they're more committed to society, and you'll get a lot, like their involvement in your local society will have greater dividends than any one player. Not to diminish the role of players, but game masters are important. What relationship do I have with the stores? Well, the reason, and I've mentioned this before, the reason that I went with Venture Lieutenant of Montreal instead of Venture Captain is because I have a complete bias. Chimera Games is our sponsor. They're one of the only Anglo stores in Montreal, and they're my favorite store. So I went with Venture Lieutenant so I could really just be the Chimera Games Venture Officer. Although there is another store, Shea Geek, that this coming weekend we're going to. I think it's this weekend. Yeah, this weekend there is going to be a Pathfinder Society gaming event. So I don't have any problem with the other gaming stores. Just that I have a very strong relationship with Chimera Games, as I think most people do. People tend to have their friendly local gaming store, not their variety of local gaming stores that they sometimes weave in and out between. So I have a very good relationship with them, and as a result, I have access to a Google Calendar, which they schedule all their events, and so I can include the Pathfinder Society events, and I'll have greater insight into when is a good time to schedule a game and when they might be busy, and so we should work around that date. Finally, do I have any recommendations on how to organize game days or small conventions? Yeah, give it about a month and just churn the hype machine. I recommend setting up a website, or at the very least a Facebook page. Google Drive offers many useful tools that you can make planning it interactive, so you can set which GMs are interested, you can set the times, and have people just fill them out on their own, so you don't have to be the one keeping track of all the information. It could be volunteer-directed assistance. Beyond that, I mean, I like setting a theme. So for the last ChimeraCon that we did, it was definitely built around the idea that we were launching Season 5. So we had the special, the Siege of the Diamond City, set up for the Saturday night. And so Saturday during the day was Season 5 scenarios that weren't part of the meta plot, and earlier season scenarios, so that anything you played on the weekend, it went from the order of not being involved in the World Wound to World Wound happens, and then the Sunday games, I encouraged the GMs to pick those scenarios that took place after the World Wound, so there was some kind of a continuity in the scenarios played by the players that joined. Something like that. So if you know that there's a certain, I don't know, like if your local sports team's the Pirates, you can just try and find all of the scenarios that involve pirate ships or any kind of ship-to-ship combat. Anything like that. Anything that you can just really just hang a theme on so that you can create a catchphrase more easily, you can summarize your event more easily, and just something intriguing that will make people be like, oh, this isn't just a Pathfinder Society event, this is the Pathfinder Society pirate event, and we've got that local pirate sports team that we all enjoy. Beyond that, stay involved in the community and stay excited.
Our local team is the Bears, so I would want to see like an all-owlbear day.
All-owlbear?
Yes.
Oh, jeez. I can think of one scenario that has an owlbear.
I can think of one scenario and one legal module.
I was actually thinking of the legal module, but man, that would really fit into your owlbear theme.
Yeah. Alrighty, moving on. Crystal Stevenson asks, do you think they will ever do Iron Gods as an expansion to the adventure card game?
She just asked this in chat as a follow-up to what we were talking about earlier, I mean, broadly speaking, yes. Someday they may do Iron Gods. It's definitely a possibility. And if you're saying, will they do it in the near future? I mean, it's possible, but it feels like with Wrath of the Righteous, that's coming out right while there's still a lot of support for it. There's still a lot of art for it. Actually, maybe doing it almost immediately after the Adventure Path concludes is the perfect release time, because there is so much stuff just based around the feel of the Adventure Path, plus all the there's all the support material. There's still hype for it. People would still be playing in it. So if in January they announced it was Iron Gods as the next game, that would be kind of cool. I think that would work out for them, assuming that Iron Gods is a successful and popular adventure path.
And I think, honestly, it has a better chance than most to being picked, because if you look at the fantasy card game scene and other games that are very popular, if you look at Magic the Gathering, if you look at Ascension, if you look at just a billion other choices, the whole techno-fantasy merging and competing against each other is a theme that you see again and again and again. I mean, just the entire Urza saga of Magic was based on that very concept, and half the other games love to throw their robots in with their swords and sorcery. So even though something like Iron Gods might be a controversial choice, I vehemently disagree. In the role-playing game scene, it would be not controversial at all for fantasy card game players.
And thinking about how the game works, where you've got all your item cards and your adversaries and stuff, Iron Gods is great because it separates that deck from all the other decks. I mean, every adventure path will have to have some variety of swords, but only one of them can give you laser pistols.
Yes. And laser pistols, there's never a wrong reason to have a laser pistol.
Emmanuel Green asked via facebook.com/nodirection, how do you pronounce Kotchkis? So Kotchki is it is the Deathless Frost Giant God. It's a demon lord of giants. Oh, sorry, he's not a god. He's a demon lord of giants and cold. He plays a major role in Reign of Winter, and Emmanuel Green wants to know how it's pronounced. I believe it's pronounced Kotchki. Param, do you concur?
I thought it was Kotchki.
Kotchki. Well, okay, there is a CHTCHIE.
But
I believe the second CH is a CK pronunciation, whichever. I don't know if that's a soft CH.
Now, I looked into this as much as I could. I could not find the official pronunciation for it.
And with a lot of things, there is no official pronunciation, so that's my recommendation. It just seems like Emmanuel would like some pronunciations so you can consistently say the word. And so I'm recommending Kotchki. It's easy enough to say. You don't trip over any syllables. Kotchki, Kotchki, Kotchki. Go for it.
I do have an alternate way of answering this question, though.
Oh.
How should you pronounce Kotchki with as much doom and ominence as possible?
Oh, we actually have Anthony Lee is he's written it out phonetically in chat. Kotch Tik TK? Are we thinking about the same thing, Anthony? And do you have a reason to why do you think that's the pronunciation? Is that your personal preference, or do you actually have the official pronunciation of this word? Kotch Tik TK. I don't see that when I look at the word. Kotch Tik TK. Kotch Tik TK. I mean, it's possible.
Version of it, yes. Yeah. I guess I'm not aware of an official pronunciation for it. I could not find it in their search for it. But Anthony, if you've got some answers for us, let us know, and we'll add that.
Yeah, you any good with the Demon Lord of Cold Giants? Who do you work for? Oh, there's a pronunciation guide in the back of one of the Reign of Winter books, he says.
And we have rolled a crit fumble. Thank you, Anthony, for saving us from that. All right, Emmanuel, we just answered that one. Avinka Thalma via the No Direction YouTube channel. Is this our first no question from YouTube?
I believe so, other than the ones that come in live.
Asks a whole lot. First, how can we know when the future live episodes will happen? Second, Ryan, Have you started your Rise of the Rune Lords game yet? I'm running it for the first time tomorrow and wanted to know how things worked for you. Also, really enjoyed that episode where you talked about what's needed when GMing and choosing an AP.
Thank you, Evenka. So the easy answer is number one. We are very good about updating our Facebook page, facebook.com/nodirection, and letting you know when the future episodes are. We are usually good about posting it around Monday, or at least posting a hint of it and creating the event by Tuesday. I plan on posting regularly the same update on nodirectionpodcast.com, because the way that the page works now, where it just constantly feeds new articles, I can just post a, hey, here's a quick update article, and that would be a perfect way of just saying, like, heads up, we've got an episode recording this week or next week, however much head time we have for it. And yeah, just posting it on the site as in pretty much the same format we post on the Facebook page. Probably even a link back to the Facebook event, because that way people can say whether they're going or not, and we can keep track of what our audience is.
And that's a very important point added there that I forgot to mention. Not only did we get a new website, but as we discussed before, the flagship show has shifted from Private Sanctuary over to No Direction. And with that change, so has the domain name also changed. So instead of 35privatesanctuary.com, the new primary domain name to access our network is nodirectionpodcast.com. But for those of you that still love 35privatesanctuary.com or are worried about your RSS links, don't worry. All those old links will still work and still get you here. And also, no need to worry at all about the Private Sanctuary going anywhere. That content is still coming out fast and furious and will continue to do so for the much foreseeable future.
Evenka's second question was about my Rise of the Rune Lords game. Have I started yet? No, we are still closing off Carrion Crown. We're in the last book. And we've been pumping through about 4 or 5 encounters a session.
Wow.
And it's still, and these are high-level encounters, but it's still taken us a long time to get through Book 6, which is just back-to-back dungeon crawls, which is a little disappointing because after so much plot and so much interweaving conspiracy, it would have been nice if there was a little more plot to the last book, or at least more context to the encounters to tell us why we're doing these 2 back-to-back dungeon crawls instead of one dungeon crawl and one, I don't know, wider social or plot impactful event. But anyway, Tina is pretty confident that we are going to finish up by September, and so I have started to do some prep. And one of the big reasons I was hesitant to run an AP, though, is that prep takes a long time, and it's hard to go into it with 2 feet when you've also got all these other cool books that are coming out and stuff to prep for the podcast and other commitments, my Pathfinder Society commitments. It's just one more ball that I'm juggling. But I am early in the prep period. I've started reading all of the background information on the entire adventure path, which this being Rise of the Rune Lords means I've actually got the whole thing in hand, which is helpful. I've taken notes on all the proper names of the characters so that I will be pronouncing them properly. I can take notes about how I plan on role-playing them. At the beginning of Part 1, there's some speech that's not written out, so I've actually written out that speech. And the first book takes place in Sandpoint, and there's a whole Sandpoint gazetteer in the back. So that's my next. That's my next phase.
That's super important. The entire success of that whole adventure path is getting your players to care about Sandpoint.
I don't foresee much problem with that. It gives a lot of cool hooks right in the beginning of the adventure. In fact, the first session recommends just hanging out in Sandpoint and letting the players kind of shoot. What is it called when it's not? Oh, sandbox it. Just kind of sandbox around Sandpoint and not worry too much about combat. Which, after the last book of Carrion Crown, I don't think people are going to be itching too much for combat, other than to see what their new characters can do.
Mm. What I ended up doing is I ended up running both the sample encounters they have and then inventing several other very minor events and encounters that each one would showcase a separate point of Sandpoint. So with the orphanage that has the wizard that I ran a really creepy doll-type storyline in there that took about half a session, and then there was this whole session about the brew houses, and then the whole getting one of the players dared to try hagfish, and all kinds of other options. And this is also a good tip for just any GM that wants to let their players explore some towns. Let them go ahead and explore what they want, and let them encourage, but also don't ever let entropy get in the way, where when you're faced with a myriad of choices, they decide to choose nothing or have a hard time making choices. And then by introducing small little encounters or events, either written by yourself or inspired by the Ultimate Campaign downtime encounters rules, or various other methods to just sort of add flavor without having to roll initiative.
I have all of the comic books. Like the first round of comic books had a whole bunch of encounters in the back, all set in Sandpoint. And so I've got all the little maps, a little encounter that are all low level. I believe they're all first level encounters or close enough to it. So I might take your idea, Param, but just use what I've already got. Use that cool pre-existing material that I have, which kind of foreshadows some of the events that will be happening in Sandpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Ediol via the forums asks, I would like to write rules regarding leadership, but before I start, I would like to understand how publishing content works. Since I like too many, what? Oh, since I like so many, no. Since
I'd like to maybe make a few dollars with this, and I need to understand the legal side of it. What are other things I need to read if I want to publish anything? I know there's the OGL, but are there some license that only applies in some instances and others? Also, any others that I need to know regarding publishing a book by myself? Oh boy, that's a gigantic loaded question. Okay, first thing, this deviates into legal issues and legal advice and business advice, and we have to start right here by saying, me, Ryan, we are not business attorneys. We are media personalities and freelance programmers and a freelance writer. So take everything we have with a grain of salt and research it yourself. Nothing can substitute going the footwork, reading this stuff, and talking it out. Now that said, if you have any questions about publishing for Pathfinder, contact Pathfinder. They are super, super helpful about what questions that what is allowed, what isn't allowed, and the steps you need to take. Now beyond that, what you need to do. The first thing is that yes, there is the OGL, and any content for Pathfinder has to be published, well, not really has to, but is likely to be published under the OGL. There are some other ways to publish things that I would not recommend because it involves juggling a whole lot of stuff and hoping nothing goes wrong. You have to do some tap dances around trademarked phrases, and you have to invoke a legal precedent that has never been tested in court, saying that game rules cannot be copyrighted, and it's really not worth it, in my opinion. Okay, everything I'm saying is in my opinion. Especially since the OGL is out there, it's free to use, and it has relatively few restrictions, though those restrictions are very important. In addition to the OGL, the Open Gaming License, which allows you to reference things based on the 3.0 and 3.5 edition of Dungeons & Dragons, which are called the D20 System Rules, and you're no longer allowed to call them the D20 System Rules either. There is also, for Pathfinder, 2 other licenses that you can choose between. There's the Community Use License, which is a license that I use for the gm.org and a lot of my Pathfinder fan stuff and other great fan works make, such as Wayfinder or the Pathfinder Fiction Archive, or the, Pathfinder Chronicles. What is it? Pathfinder Chronicler?
Pathfinder Chronicler.
Sorry guys, I have a lot of Pathfinder-y things named after various Pathfinder-y things in my head. Okay, so Wayfinder, Pathfinder Chronicle, Archives of Nethys, all of these are community use products that are incredibly successful, but the key to community use is that they are free, and they have to be distributed freely, and they have some extra special rules that you're really not allowed to profit from them at all any way going. You are allowed to have advertisements on your website. That's it. An advertisement on your website will not make you a rich man. That said, some of the best products and the advantage of Pathfinder community use is they are actually allowed to say things like Galarian. The Pathfinder wiki is only possible because of this. You can actually use proper nouns and mention things about the game, like Valros and use some art that is published on the blogs and all kinds of really, really neat things that you are not allowed to do if you accept the Pathfinder compatibility license. The Pathfinder compatibility license is something like the D20 license that was released when the OGL came out, which let you do a few extra things. For one of them is you're allowed to put the Pathfinder compatibility logo on your product, which is a nice Pathfinder-ish, well, it's a Pathfinder logo that clearly designates that this is a compatible product. You're allowed to put it on the cover. It's not allowed to be the biggest thing on your cover. There's lots of restrictions. You're going to have to read these rules. Yeah, it's like that. I'm going to click Ryan. Hold it up again, Ryan. I'm going to, let's see. Yeah, you get to put one of those on there. Is that the LFG thing?
Maybe.
Okay, is that maybe the LFG thing? And that is really important because it lets people know at a glance that they can use your product for Pathfinder. The other thing it lets you do is actually sell this stuff. You can actually market the material, so whether it's LFG, some of the stuff from Rat Publishing, some of the stuff from Rogue Genius Games, from Fire Mountain Games, from Legendary Games. Guys, if you're a third-party friend of the show, I'm sorry that I can't mention all of you at once in this sentence, but there are some great people doing some really great stuff with that license. But you're not allowed to mention Galarian or some of the other stuff that Pathfinder really says that, hey, this is our trademark stuff. You can use almost all the rules. There are like ridiculously tiny few that you're not allowed to use. And like mostly that comes in the effect that you can use Kaedan's Blasting Cup as in your book, but you have to call it something else's Blasting Cup. Pathfinder, the game, released all its stuff under OGL, the rule system, almost all of it, because they're awesome like that. And that means you get a great deal of freedom on what you're allowed to develop. But you can't mention Galarian or any of the other, and you can't use any of their artwork. You have to use the compatibility logo, and you have to use special language about what is required to use the product. For instance, you can't directly name adventure paths. You have to, like Legendary Games, where they make adventure path compatible stuff, they can't say that this supplement is meant to be used with Jade Regent. They have to say this supplement is meant to be used with the Eastern themed adventure paths that may or may not be out there. And while some of this song and dance may seem a little bit much, you actually, compared to lots of other products and license and stuff, have a ridiculous amount of freedom and use of material. And like I said, the Paizo staff are extremely helpful because they want a healthy, high-quality third-party support out there, because without third-party support, Pathfinder wouldn't exist, because they originally started as third-party support for 3.5 Dungeons & Dragons. Now, again, the final word on this is that all of this is just sort of a bird's-eye view of what you need to do. The key is to go on the Pathfinder site, go into their compatibility or community use. It sounds like you want to make a profit, so you need to be in the compatibility license section. And almost all of this is laid out in nice, handy FAQs and documents that explain exactly what you're signing up for.
Now, part of your question wasn't just the legal thing, but just any advice regarding publishing books by yourself. And I have self-published, not gaming material, but it's been a while since I plugged Mrs. Fritz's Kids, so I've got my series of kids' books. And you can't see them behind me, but I've got hundreds of these just lying around my house, because by the fourth book I was buying large quantities and selling about the same quantities. So yeah, when I think about self-publishing, I really have to ask, why would you do that? Param already listed a couple of the third-party publishers for the Pathfinder role-playing game, and he was right. We literally do not have time or the memory to list every third-party publisher for Pathfinder. So if you've got a cool rule for leadership, why not write down the summary of the rules, really trim it, really make sure your language is great, and pitch it. Send it to Kobold Press, send it to Rogue Genius Games, send it to Little Red Goblin Press. Pick whatever company best suits the feel for your rules and see if they're willing to print it. There's so many. I could just keep listing more and more that Param didn't mention. because there's just such a huge amount of third-party publishers. Why do you want to be one more person that's trying to do the publishing end of it when there's people that have proven they know how to do that, they've gotten their names out there? Why don't you want to be just one of the freelancers that gets to do the easy, the fun part, and send it off to the people to do the more complicated, more risky part? They're already out there. There are so many of them that are out there. You have no reason to get into the publishing game. I strongly recommend anyone that is thinking about publishing their own material ask, do you just want to be a freelancer with more control, or do you actually have some desire to be a publisher? Because if you don't have a desire to be a publisher, then you're just making the fun part of designing stuff also the work part of designing stuff.
Yeah, and me and Ryan will also, I imagine you're going to back me up on this statement that says, also be careful when you turn your hobby into a profession, because as much as we love it, and we do love it, and as much as we love being here, we do love being here. I can certainly say that I had a lot more fun when this also was not my job.
Sure. Well, I was just showing off. This is for plugging later, but the Looking for Group role-playing game. Param asked me how many games not related to the Looking for Group role-playing game I'm going to be playing at GenCon.
Ryan, how many games not related to Looking for Group are you going to be playing at GenCon?
1, and it took a lot of string pulling. I'm basically going to be playing 8 hours a day for 4 days promoting that game, and that's great because I think that's an awesome game, and I think our demo is going to be a lot of fun, and I'll get to meet a lot of people. But GenCon's not mine this year. GenCon is Looking for Groups. It's Blind Ferrets, and there's just one GenCon a year. But I've flipped. I've flipped from being a fan to a fan that also does stuff to now just the special project specialist at Blind Ferret, and so I'm basically going to be on the production side of GenCon or the promotion side of GenCon. And I'll get to see other people having the fun and hear about all the fun other people had, and knowing that I might never get that fun again.
And I'm going to be married to a camera.
It's a very nice camera.
It is going to be a very nice camera. And thank you all for the very nice camera, our Kickstarter backers.
Yes. We've got a couple more videos.
That said, we do not want to discourage any potential publisher. We're mentioning all the pitfalls and things you need to think about, but there are things you need to think about. This cannot be incredibly rewarding. The very first time I held in my hand something that got officially published with my name on it, I was happy as a schoolgirl with a cookie.
We've got a couple of questions from chat. I'm going to say, Lycan101 says, with the impending release of the Advanced Class Guide, what class are you looking forward to playing? And based on what you know, how in-depth do you think the Class Builder chapter will be? All right, Param, what class are you most looking forward to playing in the Advanced Class Guide?
Investigator.
You know what? I was originally iffy about the Investigator, but Investigator has become the most intriguing class to me.
I recently ran one of our Kickstarter backer games, and Anthony Lee, who's in chat here, joined us, and he played an investigator. And I didn't see him do too much investigator-y stuff, but it seemed like a very cool class, and I've been impressed with it. And it's just sort of a beat off the path from what we expect a class in a fantasy D&D-like game to be. I mean, we're used to a billion different spellcasters, but actual something codified to handle a lot of the mystery and investigation part of the games is nice, especially in society where knowledge check, epic backstory that sometimes the GM doesn't get to tell you because nobody took the correct skills or abilities or looked in the right directions to find out exactly why this green mold is hiding under the bronze statue of a bull. And why that map's on the table.
I've been playing a Brawler in Pathfinder Society since the Advanced Class Guide playtest came out, and the Brawler is fun, but it's nothing I couldn't have done with a monk or with a fighter. It's neat that mechanically they've kind of joined them together, and it does something mechanically that neither the pugilist archetype for the fighter could have done, or I guess there's no real monk archetype that drops the Eastern philosophy. But actually, I'm playing a sumo, so I've already got an Eastern flavor to a brawler, which one of the advantages I'm not married to Eastern flavor anymore. So, yeah, the brawler is fun, but the Inquisitor is like, wow, this is something different. Beyond that, the swashbuckler looks really cool. Kathy and I just talked about the Gunslinger in a Private Sanctuary class feature, and one of my final points was, this is a cool class, but why is it a gunslinger? Why isn't it just a weapon specialist? Why are these mechanics reserved for just guns? Well, the swashbuckler is basically the gunslinger with a sword, and it gets to use all those really cool mechanics, but with a sword, or with a piercing weapon. So I guess I can use a spiked chain if I really want to get wacky, or a Vresian fighting scarf. Yes. Thinking about that now. And actually, Jay... What's that?
You're Jackie Channing things at this point.
Oh, you just made it better. Jay in my home game will be playing a swashbuckler in the Rise of the Rune Lords, so I get to see through him how that class works, just like Team's been playing a Blood Rager in Pathfinder Society, and I get to see that it's really just kind of a barbarian with a couple of supernatural and spell-like abilities. So, yeah, just looking over all the classes, most of them feel like a hybrid class, whereas the Investigator feels like a whole new class. Also from Jet, Avenka Thalma says, which one is your favorite Pathfinder Tales novel? Param, I believe you and I have both gone on record saying that Liar's Blade is the best. It's our favorite. It's the one we always recommend people to read if you're curious about Pathfinder Tales, or if you're a little hesitant because it's tie-in fiction.
Yeah. Gosh, I love Liar's Blade. Liar's Blade. Oh man. Yeah, Liar's Blade, but I really also like Pirate's Honor. But Liar's Blade.
Which we should mention the author, Tim Pratt.
Yep, Tim Pratt. You did a great book. Fantastic book.
Now, if you wanted our top 10, that could be a longer list, but no, Liar's Blade. If you're just looking for a favorite.
Right. We love it. Now that said, I'm usually most excited about the next Radovan book coming out.
Which hasn't been announced, but Dave Gross has been talking about his next Pathfinder Tales project a lot on his Facebook page.
Oh, excellent! I'm always I definitely missed it that there was not a new Radovan this year, so I'll be very glad to read the next Radovan and Varian.
Yeah, there's more than just Radovan. All right.
I know, and actually Varian's my favorite of the two. It's just easier to say it's the Radovan book because he's really become the main character in the series, especially as they've gone on. You don't think so?
The main character? No, I think it's still a pretty good split. Queen of Thorns was a lot more about Varian than Radovan. It was all about Varian's father. Like, Radovan was just having that fling with the Inquisitor of Calistria, whose character's name I forget. But, yeah, no, it's... So, yeah, maybe King of Chaos had a little bit more character exploration for Radovan, but the one immediately before that had a lot more Varian. So you can't say it's not like this straight path to Radovan dominance. It's this curving
Prince of
line.
Wolves, Radovan dominated it. I mean, Varian had a good bit of role, and I liked his parts. But Radovan definitely had the strongest arc that continued into Masters of Devils, and we continued to explore that arc and character development of him while Varian was still Varian and doing cool things, and he had his own adventure, but not at all tied to the previous adventure. And then we had Queen of Thorns, where we finally got to know a lot more about Varian. And yes, he had the strongest arc in that book, but Radovan's arc continued from his previous arc. And finally, in Master of Devils, his arc was definitely more dominant and was a follow-up. So yes, Varian gets to split timeshare with him, but there's one giant Radovan story that started in Prince of Wolves and continued on through all 4 books, and Varian has unrelated adventures.
But Varian's adventures are the plot of the book, whereas Radovan may have more series. Anyway, it's just 2 characters are being explored in 2 different ways.
We're making Dave.
However you define main character is up to you.
Yep.
What's our next question?
Our next question comes from... I have lost it. Okay, here it is. Comes from Denzel via nodirection@hotmail.com. He asked, does tandem trip teamwork feat provoke an attack of opportunity?
Good question. So the tandem trip is a combat and teamwork feat. It says benefit whenever you attempt to whenever you attempt a trip combat maneuver against an enemy threatened by an ally with this feat, you roll twice, take the better result. And that's all it says. So it doesn't say anything about provoking attacks of opportunity or not. So absolutely, if you're attempting it and you don't have improved trip, then yes, it still provokes an attack of opportunity.
And
What's
that surprised, that surprised the heck out of us, because we thought for absolute certain that the answer to this was going to be no, because we thought improved trip was obviously going to be a prerequisite. It's not. You can totally get this without improved trip. I wouldn't.
Well, okay. If you've got one guy in the party with improved trip and you're the fighter and you're getting all these bonus feats and you're like, I don't know what to do with my next bonus feat, then you can coordinate with that trip expert and be like, I'm willing to take the tandem trip for you to gain the benefit, but you're the one that's going to be doing all the tripping. Deal, deal. And then that's the only situation that I can see you taking tandem trip. Or actually, no, if you've got a reach weapon, then people can't take an attack of opportunity on you, but you can use the reach weapon to trip them. Okay, there are situations where tandem trip can be useful even without improved trip. But if you're going to be taking tandem trip, odds are you want to be good at tripping. Improved trip has more than just doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity attached to it. You get the +2 bonus, and it opens up greater improved trip, which means when you trip the guy, your trip provokes attacks of opportunity from you and all around you, and if you're already got the tandem trip, then that's 2 people that are almost guaranteed to be close enough that you're going to be benefiting from the attack of opportunity.
And that's usually my problem with the teamwork feats, actually, tangentially related to this, is that you have to really coordinate. Like, if I was going to do that and get the improved trip, the greater improved, or what was that version called again?
Greater improved trip.
Okay, greater improved trip and tandem trip, and I was going to team up with a person that was also going to take tandem trip. They would probably also want greater improved trip, and they would also want combat reflexes so that they could attack of opportunity, attack of opportunity, attack of opportunity. You have to build these characters together, plan them out well in advance, and really, really sync things up. That's often not possible in groups where you have one guy that wants to play the melee character, one guy that wants to play the castery character. He's sure as heck not going to get up there. The cleric, maybe, but he's not got enough feats to spare. And the roguey type person's the only other type person that would be wanting to do this. Now, of course, game groups aren't limited to the classic 4, but everybody usually tries to assume a role, and it's very, very, very rare that 2 people can be that coordinated and complementary and still flesh out the roles.
Which is probably one of the best reasons that tandem trip doesn't have improved trip as a prerequisite, because unless you're getting it as a bonus feat from a class like the monk, where you get to ignore prerequisites, then improved trip has unarmed strike. I believe that's the one that has, or combat expertise. Anyway, it has a feat prerequisite there. So if 2 people have to be taking combat expertise or improved unarmed strike, whichever one it is, and improved trip just to get tandem trip, that's 2 people in your party with 3 of the same feats. And unless you're one of the classes that benefits from a lot of bonus combat feats, then yeah, it's not likely to ever actually happen. Or you end up with 2 characters that are exactly the same.
And Denzel's other question, very simply, grappling.
It was actually a much more complicated question, but whenever a question about grappling comes up, I send people to the PFSRD. pfsrd.com/gamemastering/combat #TOC-grapple, and there is the greatest charts for grappling ever compiled. It's flowcharts created by Tom Flock, 2 of them, and it is everything you need to know about grapple. As someone that's just been confused about grapple, I've learned stuff about grapple here, and it's really easy to manage. You just go one step at a time, answering the yes or no questions, which all lead back into the same main flow line. So it's a really easy flow chart. It simplifies grapple. It still means that if anyone's going to be grappling and doing anything basic or complicated or what have you, then it will be a series of questions. But at least it'll be a series of questions where you get all your answers by referencing one of 2 charts, instead of flipping back and forth to the combat section, the combat maneuver section, remembering that there's rules about combat maneuvers broadly at the beginning of that chapter, and then more rules for grapple a little bit later. Just check the chart. Everyone needs to print this out. It's 2 pages, so print it back to back. Laminate it if you can. The grapple chart, Tom Flock's grapple chart on the PFSRD.
Oh boy, I thought they were supposed to make this simpler.
You know what? It is simpler, because it's more consistent at least, but it is still the most complicated combat maneuver.
Suddenly getting flashbacks of the 4E promos with the barbarian hugging the troll.
Yeah.
Alright, moving on. Hope that answered it for you, Denzel. Bard Wannabe asks via our forums, which will be returning shortly, how is the animate object spell supposed to work? It seems that the rules are spread out over multiple locations, and I feel I'm still trying to missing something.
All right. I have never personally animated an object. Param, have you?
No, I just use them as monsters.
Yeah, same here. I like a good animated object as a monster, and I know that there are ways that these things are being created. I've just never looked into the details of how. But, okay. You've got 3 basic pages that you want to be looking up. You want to look up the animated objects in the bestiary, because that's where the rules for actually figuring out what the rules of the animated object are. So if you're animating a chair, that's where you go to figure out what the chair is going to be doing. And you actually do have to build your animated object from scratch based on the build points. Then the other thing you want is in the core rulebook, you've got the animate object spell. This is a spell that it feels mostly complete, although no, I mean it tells you how many build points you get, and yeah, I'm not too sure between those two, what are you missing?
I mean, the animate object spell creates 1 small object per caster level, and you can trade those up at a 2-to-1 trade up for the next size up. So medium is 2 smalls, large is 4 smalls, huge is 8 smalls, gargantuan 16 smalls, colossal is 32 smalls, which means that's caster level 32. I'm scared of you. Please quit animating my castle. And then other than that, you would hopefully have the animated object stats that you want to use ready and willing to go and ready to just get out there. To make things quick, you could just use the standard medium object that's in the bestiary if you're pulling it out really quickly. So target medium objects, so animate the table or animate the chest of drawers or something really quick and make your GM's life easier. But if you're going to be pulling this thing out again and again and again at the table, you pretty much don't want to be build pointing it. So build point out animated objects that you like to animate often and have those on hand so that your GM is able to easily educate the fight and you're able to quickly kick monster butt.
And then finally, related to animated objects, Ultimate Magic has a section on building and modifying constructs, but that is more for you as a player, and it goes into animated objects and kind of just breaks down the philosophy of the mechanics. But if you are animated objects as a player, or if an NPC is doing it and you're the GM, animated objects in bestiary, animated objects in core rulebook, and that should be everything you need to know. Crystal Stevenson in chat asked, how do you handle in-game romances between either 2 PCs or a PC and an NPC so that those involved get a rewarding role-playing experience, yet it does not become boring or a source of jokes for the other party members? Now, this is something that I see discussed fairly often, and people are like, oh, how do I handle it? And I always find that interesting because it so rarely happens in my games. But it's not so rare that it's never happened. In our first campaign, Tina was playing a character that married or was in a long-term relationship with Matt's character, and it just happened naturally, and nobody in the group really objected to it, so I can't really give any insight into that. Whereas in Kingmaker, Geraldine, my princess, is dating an NPC created and run by Ari, our GM, and so we're both gender swapping, and we're dating even though both of us are married and both of our significant others are at the table at the time. We just keep it in character, and both of us we don't go into any crazy details about it. We have a little fun, and then we move on so that it doesn't bog down the play experience, but we definitely make sure that anytime we have a scene, there's a purpose to the scene, and that it advances in some way the relationship or sets something up to be explored later. From the way you explain it in your example, it seems more like some members in your group are okay with this and actually seeking this out, that this is a fun part of the game for them, whereas other people in the group shy away from that, and that's like anything else in the game of just compromising and making sure everyone is getting the rewarding experience they want. I think if somebody is making jokes at the expense of the person who enjoys romance in the game, those people should be chastised, and if you can find a way to play their game and make fun of them for it, then maybe it will drive home the point in a way that they understand. Otherwise, yeah, just kind of remind people that everyone plays the game for different reasons, and anyone making fun of somebody else's reasons for playing the game maybe is kind of the jerk in the situation and should be called out for it.
Yeah. Now, just like every other, honestly, romance in the game has its nuances and things, but at this very basic level, it's just another element of plot and good storytelling. It appears in nearly every media or story or fiction or audio product that has ever been made in the history of mankind. So you have lots of examples to draw from on how romance can be handled correctly. So just sort of pay attention to those story beats, and remember that just like any scene, like Ryan said, there needs to be a point to the story so that it's not just boring. You don't have to get into the uncomfortable subjects at the table, or remember to fill out your various groups' comfort level, and also make sure that, just so the other players don't become bored, that you're dividing the time at the spotlight at the table appropriately as any good GM would, so that, you know, it's no different than somebody who wants to do like a whole lot of academic research to find out all kinds about the big bad, and the next bard wants to make sure that their stories become famous in the towns, and the barbarian wants to find a new mentor and learn how to train in the woods to fight bears with his bare hands, and I mean bare hands because we're getting some polymorph on. It's just another part of the story that player is participating in. I find that this most often happens for me between PCs and NPCs, because there is some awkwardness when you're doing some role-playing romantic things at the table in front of other players with another player. So it almost always happens for me between PCs and NPCs, and that's also very important because people live in this world and people have families, and NPCs obviously have romance between each others because that's how other NPCs are made. And it's important. So I just say don't overthink it. Fill out your group's comfort level. Pay attention to what a literal ton of other media and stories out there can provide for you. And most importantly, make sure you guys are having fun. And as for people making fun of it, don't be jerks, guys. Everybody loves different things. All right, moving on while Ryan gets connected back to us. MedTech via 35privatesanctuary.com asks, how does the Paladin's Detect Evil work? Alright, well, Detect Evil is a special ability that Paladins get, and they allow the Paladin to use Detect Evil as the spell, and that they're able to do it as a move action, and they have to be concentrating on a single item or individual within 60 feet to determine if it is evil. Now, keep in mind a few things about this. It's a spell, so they're doing it, and it's going to be fairly obvious that he is doing it. But other than that, just go to the spell and just sort of educate it out. So the kicker with the detect spells is they don't just happen all at once and you know things. It's a ongoing, in-depth thing that takes time, and usually any of the detect spells go over a series of rounds. So when you go to Detect Evil, on the first round, you just get the yes and no answer. Hey, is that evil? Yep. Or nope. Also, keep in note, it's Detect Evil, not Detect Good, not Detect Neutral. So It's not always the end-all be-all in finding out whether or not somebody's trustworthy or not. And there are a ridiculous number of ways to beat the spell because bad guys know it's out there and bad guys can get magic. In the second round, you get to know the number of evil auras. Now, this is not going to help the paladin out too much because he has to focus on a single object or spell. So 99 times out of 100, it's
Can I
gone.
stop you there? Because you're
Yeah.
actually, you are calling an interpretation that's actually the main reason that MedTech was asking the question.
Uh-huh.
You are saying that a paladin can only do the move action, concentrate on a single individual or item. The question is, can he do both the spell and the paladin version? And the answer, I believe, is yes, because if you read the Detect Evil from the paladin, it says, at will, paladin can use Detect Evil as the spell. Period. That's it. So it seems like, yes, both versions of the spell are accessible to the paladin, because the next sentence says the paladin can, as in an option, as a move action, concentrate on a single item or individual within 60 feet to determine if, as though the third round of concentrating with the regular spell. So the big question here that MedTech is asking is, can he do both regular Detect Evil and Paladin specialized single target Detect Evil, or just Paladin single target specialized Detect Evil? And by my reading of the rule, I say he can do both.
Huh. I have read this rule 1,000 times.
As have I, and until MedTech asked the rule, I would have interpreted
thought
it the
that
same
it
way
was
you did.
absolutely limited to the single target version. But you're right. That is a period, not a comma.
Had it said additionally a Paladin can as a move action, that would have made it a lot clearer. But
Right.
that is a full stop. And it doesn't say anywhere that he can't use Detect Evil as the spell. In fact, it says he can.
Yeah, it's not when he does or in doing so or any other transition. It's basically, here's 2 special powers Mr. Paladin gets. And I imagine also Detect Evil's on the spell list too. So, yep. I'm sorry, MedTech. Ryan got me there. And you're right. You can Detect Evil as the spell, go through it the normal way, or you can use the super fast Ultra Turbo version.
Next up, Terry Schmel via Facebook.com/NoDirection says, would my character be able to use Pounce Feet in conjunction with Spring Attack? This character has Claw, Bite attacks. So there's 2 answers. Actually, one of them is a counter question, because you say the Pounce Feet, and I don't know if you're just using feet as a broad term, but there is no feat that I know of that gives you the Pounce ability, which is usually reserved for monsters, although there are some class features that give you Pounce. So this is just a technicality, but I don't know where you're getting this Pounce feat that I've never heard of. Param, do you know of any Pounce feat?
3.5 version of it.
Even then, the Totem Barbarian had it, but I don't remember any feat.
Yeah, me neither. Pounce is so great, but it's so hard to get.
And there's a reason for that. It means that you can move and use a full attack, which is not the same as spring attacking. Spring attack is a special full-round action that includes taking an attack, but it's not actually declaring your action as an attack. So a typical fighter, if he's moving and attacking, then if he somehow had access to Pounce and had a Claw, Bite attacks, then yes, then he would be able to use it. But otherwise, if it's any other action that involves making an attack, it really has to be you are taking an attack. So something like Power Attack, that's fine, because it's not an action. That's just something that's done whenever an attack is made. But if you're making an attack action, that is when something like Pounce comes into play.
Right.
We'll point you towards a recent blog by the Everyman Gamer, Alex Agunas, who's in chat, and we're going to make an announcement a little later, although we've already pretty much made the announcement before. But yeah, he specifically calls out all kinds of different attacks and how most questions involving fighters usually come down to people not understanding exactly what the attack action is. And you know what? It's so confusing that if you look at the NPC Codex, which is just full of Paizo-published NPCs, some of them in their tactics say that the character tends to use Vital Strike with a charge, which Vital Strike is like Sneak Attack, or Spring Attack rather. That is something that needs its own action and could not be combined with something like Vital Strike, which also needs its own, could not be combined with a charge, which is a different type of action. So check out Alex's blog. It's a pretty comprehensive, pretty straightforward way of explaining the attack action.
Yeah, and I admit that's a little bit hard to understand at first, especially for new players, the difference between attacks and special attacks that aren't actually attacks, they're actions. But a quick, handy shortcut is if it says as a standard action, it usually can't be combined with other things. Usually. Go read the blog.
Alex, to the rescue once again. Alex Agunas in chat says that the Kutsune has a Vulpine Pounce racial feat, and he believes catfolk have one as well. So, you know what? Maybe there are actually some classes that have easier access to Pounce than others.
I'd be really surprised if catfolk had Vulpine Pounce.
What's the next question, Param?
Jay Chapman asked via our forums, I have a player playing a fighter wizard PC in one of my regular PFS games who recently changed his character's religion from Abadar to Serenray, but has the religion trait for Abadar, eyes and ears of the city. Since the retraining rules only cover racial traits that I can see, how should he handle this trait? Rules that I've found state that the FAQ says the character may only worship one deity at a time. The character may change which deity she worships between sessions at no cost. If the change requires the character to change alignment, the character is required to pay for an atonement. Any element incompatible with the new deity no longer functions. These elements may be retrained at normal cost using the rules from Ultimate Campaign. This is helpful, except my next point, retraining only covers racial traits per Ultimate Campaign, page 191. The character traits web enhancement states on page 3, the one exception to this is the religious traits, since these traits require continued faith in a specific deity. You can indeed lose the benefits of these traits if you switch religions. In this case, consult with your GM for your options. He may simply rule that you may lose the trait, or he may allow you to pick a new religion trait tied to your new deity. Another option is that you abandon a religion, you lose the associated religion traits until you gain an experience level, at which case you may replace it with the lost religion trait with the basic faith traits. This is nice in that it gives you a lot of wiggle room, but predates retraining and lacks the decisiveness I am used to with PFS. Thoughts? I feel I found the black hole in the rules.
All right.
I don't think... Sorry.
It's another case of racial and being confused with race traits. This isn't a racial trait as in the traits you get at the beginning, at first level at character creation, where you take 2 traits and they each count as a half feat. This is talking about racial traits. So if you are a dwarf and you want to retrain stability to instead get relentless, that's retraining a racial trait, not a race trait. And so a religion trait, it's the same thing as a race trait, not racial trait. So a lot of Jeff's confusion is built around the idea that there's only one specific type of trait that can be retrained, but it's because it's the other kind of trait. Now, if this was a home game, Jeff, the easy answer would be it's half a feat, so take the retraining rules for feats, divided by 2, that should be balanced. This is Pathfinder Society, and I have seen Pathfinder Society players change their deities, and this is generally done for free, and it's kind of noted on a chronicle sheet when it happens. But what happens to the religion traits that are associated with the deity you no longer worship? I mean, I could point you towards what happens when you change your faction, and what happens if you have a faction trait, but this is really something that there are no solid rules about. And with Pathfinder Society, you need solid rules. So there is a precedence that's been set, and that precedence is related to people changing their faction when they already have a faction trait. But you're basically just going to have to keep hounding the developers, the Pathfinder Society developers, on the Paizo message boards until somebody makes a ruling on this, because it does feel weird to worship one god but still gain the benefits. Actually, no. Now that I think about it, now that I started saying that sentence, I mean, if you spend your whole life worshiping God A, let's say Abadar, and you learn to be really good at locks and stuff and whatever, and then, like you said, switch to Serenray, then that doesn't mean you forget all of your training with Abadar.
I hate to contradict you on this one, Ryan, but at least what happens to the trait is pretty well established. The traits have a requirement for a worship of a deity. When you no longer worship that deity, you lose access to all abilities or elements of your character that are now incompatible. They just stop functioning. So the answer is, unfortunately, that what happens is, since you cannot retrain the trait currently in any official rule systems, it functions just like everything else related to a deity that you no longer worship. It just turns off. So that feat is effectively wasted, even though it's still on your character sheet. Should you go back to worshiping that deity, it just no longer functions.
Okay. Well then, Jeff, the bad news is that your player now has a trait that no longer does anything for them, and there's no rules for getting rid of that trait. The good news is that makes sense, because your character was so into Abadar and now has completely gotten so into Serenre, then that represents their loss of focus and their commitment to one thing in their life, just kind of following them along in their life, even if it's not giving them benefit anymore. So, role-playing. Finally, this is a comment that Sarah Bull had mentioned at the very beginning of this this segment, but I had taken it out until I got confirmation with Mike Selinker, who this quote is about, and just a few minutes ago via Facebook, Mike did confirm this. So she is going to correct something we said last episode, about the Pathfinder adventure card game. Paizo publishes the adventure card game, which is true, but they are not the developers of the card game. Lone Shark Games, which is Mike's company, is they're being farmed. They're being hired to develop the game, and then the Paizo employees that work on the game are the ones that are involved in the organized play for the adventure card game, the packaging, the conceptualizing, things like that. But the actual development of the game is still done by Lone Shark Games and Mike Selinker, who is officially not a Paizo employee.
Interesting, but that's really not so much different than, say, WizKids making the battles or the comic book coming out from Dynamite.
True. I think it was just that I represented the Paizo staff that works on the adventure card game, because there is a chunk of Paizo staffers that are just dedicated to the adventure card game. I speculated that they were the ones in charge of development and that Mike Selinker may just be a consultant. But no, he's frontline in the development of the game.
Oh, excellent. I was worried, honestly, that he was no longer involved when I saw the structure, and I was like, wait, that doesn't make much sense, but people leave projects. It would make not much sense to leave a wildly successful project this early, in my opinion, so I'm glad that's not what happened. All right, guys.
We do have a couple of follow-ups. Barb Wannabe has gotten more specific about what happens with the animated object if you make a bigger construct. Then yeah, there are rules for larger natural attacks, so use that medium one as your baseline. Find the rules in the back of the bestiary for a larger construct or a larger creature's natural attacks, and see what you bump up that their new damage dice to. And Param Alex Agunis looked up the feat that he was speculating on for Catfolk. It is called Claw Pounce, and it allows Catfolk to pounce with claws.
Oh, good. I'm glad that it was not called Vulpine Pounce.
Thank you to everyone that contributed their questions. Param, can you remind people how they can get questions to us again in the future?
Yes, right now, the two easiest ways while we recover the forums is to go on our Facebook page at facebook.com/nodirection and leave a question in the comments, first by beginning it with no question. And that'll let us know to add it to the show. Also, you can email us at nodirection@hotmail.com and email your questions there. Again, please put in the subject line, no question. When the forums come up, you can go there and add it there. Also, you can go to our website right now, and if the question is related to a topic, post, or article that we're currently hosting on the website, there's a comment section there that you can leave it. Again, please put no question so we know to farm that up and put it in our document so that we begin researching it and to answer it. You can also leave no questions on our YouTube comment pages, either on past episodes or live during the show, as many of you just did.
Param, remind me, if they post it on a past episode, will you get some kind of update, some kind of indication that that's happened?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Then I'm going to recommend people don't post in the old comments just because we don't tend to go back or at least I don't tend to go back to the old comments threads and see if there's any new comments posted. But the other things you said, the Facebook page and the No Directions comment, NoDirectionPodcast.com comment section on any of the articles, those are dynamite. And No Direction.
And we get notifications when those come in.
I'm sorry?
And we do get notifications when those come in.
Yes. We will be right back to wrap things up right after this. Thank you for joining us for episode 89 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. We would like to thank our guest earlier in the episode, Derek Guder, the event programming manager at GenCon. And before we go, we do want to give some shout-outs, some things of note to our Pathfinder enthusiasts and possibly our podcast enthusiasts, because as Per mentioned earlier, we've got a new site.
Yes, we do. 35privatesanctuary.com has now become NoDirectionPodcast.com with the same great content and a much prettier facelift. As well as a lot of new features like running comment section and the fact that the new content will be featured prominently on the front page in the blog style format so that you can see right away what's new and interesting, as well as lots of other social media stuff and other buzzwords that me working as a web professional cringe every time I have to say. It's great, it's neat, and we also are debuting our new logo and basic new marketing theme, which is a bit more modern, a bit more streamlined, and shrinks down onto tiny business cards a lot easier than our old logo. That choice was helped made by the many responses that you guys gave us when we were pitching out the logo, and it seems about a 2-to-1 margin that you guys preferred the new logo, so that's the one we're going with. Hope you like it. So this might be the very last episode of the podcast you see where we have our old logo in the front of our names. But any opinions you go to the new site or the new logo or any of the new directions we're taking, please get them to us. And none of this would be possible at all if it wasn't for our fantastic Kickstart backers that backed the relaunch of the show and the website.
Some people have been pointing out that some of the old features are gone. We're working on it. We are working on mainly bringing back the forums. That was the big thing. Private Sanctuary was about the community that was built around it, even though that community was originally based on keeping 3.5 Dungeons & Dragons alive. So even though we've moved flagships from Private Sanctuary to No Direction, we still intend for the website to be a community for people to come and be able to post their thoughts beyond just comments in the threads. So that will be coming back. It's just we had to fast-track the release of the website because of some technical issues that also took down our forums. And the bad news is the old forums are, I believe, completely gone. So we've had some good conversations, and they were unceremoniously taken from us. But that just means that we'll now have new opportunities for new conversations and a much sparser, trimmed-down, focused forums that doesn't have 1,000 subforums that nobody uses anyway.
And you know, Ryan, we're pretty lucky that we had begun the migration to the new site the exact time we did. It's almost as if our skill check had a little bit of a bonus to it.
I think I know where you're going with this, but continue.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was hoping you'd take it from there.
Almost like somebody cast guidance, Param?
Exactly.
So we announced a few months ago that we were working with Alex Agunas, the Everyman Gamer, about bringing up a blog to the new website, NoDirectionPodcast.com. Not only will we be getting blog content from Alex, we'll be getting the Everyman Gaming content. It'll be under the banner of Guidance, named after, much like the podcast, named after a spell from the core rulebook, and he will be going into the same things that we've become, that the Everyman Gaming blog was known for, the iconic designs, advice, and what is the subheader of his other thing? I can't load it right now. In any case, he goes into a lot of crunch. He is a really crunch knowledgeable guy, but he also is he's role-playing enthusiastic, and we are really happy to be able to offer more blog content and such established, credible blog content as Alex is. So it'll be Guidance with the Everyman Gamer, Alex Agunas, starting August 1st, which I guess this isn't really an announcement, but there's kind of going to be a theme to some of the August podcasts, or at least the Private Sanctuary ones. Kathy and I will be talking about the Harrow deck on the Private Sanctuary podcast flavor episode of that month, which will be 245. And then the following episode, a Crunch episode, Alex and I will be talking about the Crunch mechanics of the Harrower and the Harrow handbook that just came out, which is super exciting. We'll be talking about that in 246, our Crunch episode. And Alex's first iconic design will be using a lot of the Harrow handbook because he is making Gambit.
Oh my goodness. That's exactly what that book was made for.
There's about 5 pictures that are like, yep, Gambit, Gambit, and Gambit. And about 3 archetypes that also make your character a lot more like Gambit.
So I'm assuming a Harrow or Staff Magus will throw anything?
Oh, wow, okay.
Just a guess.
There is a Staff Magus, there is the Staff Magus, and there's also a Magus archetype that gets a special feat for throwing your Harrow cards like darts. I don't know if they synergize. I haven't seen the iconic design that's going to be released on August 1st yet, so I'm looking forward to exactly which class he narrows it down to, what options he takes. Because after Harrow Handbook, there's a lot of ways you can make Gambit.
The other thing I would like to give a good shout out to is the ridiculous amount of PaizoCon coverage that is making its way again to NoDirectionPodcast.com. The specials that have already aired include the RPG Design Seminar, the Wayfinder Seminar, Secrets of Galarian, which is I've listened to a dozen times and it's always different. Not the same recording, but they keep doing this show and it's different. If you listen to the same recording a dozen times, it's not magical internet technology.
As far as I know, Paizo does 2 Secrets of Galarian seminars, one at PaizoCon, one at GenCon every year, and we've recorded a dozen of them at this point, and yet there's always a reason to listen to new Secrets of Galarian.
Creating Pulp Adventures, the Frank Mentzer. That was the interview, right?
That was the Q&A.
The seminar. Oh, the Q&A? Sorry. The Monster Design Seminar, which I haven't got to listen to yet. The Technology and Gaming Seminar. The Secrets of TSR Seminar. That was really fun. The Diversity in Gaming Panel, which made Ryan edit like crazy.
It may have been the greatest panel I have ever listened to.
Yes, it was fantastic this year. I'm looking forward to recording the GenCon version of it, too. Horror and Gaming.
In which we found out that Ryan Macklin subscribes to the Center for Disease Control Twitter feed just for inspiration for his horror games.
Oh, good grief, man. All right. Then there's Adventure Design 101, which was special number 12. And finally, there are the Design Deities. Not to mention, of course, we have the Banquet in both video format and audio format.
People can look forward the design tips for magic items, monsters, spells, and encounters in the next couple of days, as well as Magic Design 201, making magic exciting, Pathfinder Adventure Card Game Seminar, editing RPGs, oh no, we didn't get Shimmer and Gravitas in RPGs. No, there was a problem with the recorder. So we have done almost all of the Friday seminars. I still have to get some work on the Jasper Ising, which was a video. He was the artist guest of honor this year at PaizoCon, and the Realms Work intro, because I've got a long recording of them changing seminar halls, and so it's going to take a little more work than some of the other ones. But for the most part, I'm putting these out in order, and we are Saturday morning as far as the release schedule goes, which means we've got the rest of Saturday and all of Sunday's seminars to post. I do also want to give a sub shout-out for Andrew, I'm going to say Eket. Andrew Eket was at the Horror Gaming Seminar, and he took extensive notes, which he shared on his website, which is first drafts and scraps of paper / horror _in _RPGs _ links / 2014.htm. There is a link in a comment on that seminar. So I recommend you follow along with those notes, or after you listen to it, you use his notes to inspire your horror game.
Now, I'm going to call shenanigans on this next shout-out, Ryan, because at this point I would more likely believe that Bigfoot was sitting at my game table.
No, Param. It finally happened. It took me getting a full-time job as project manager and special project specialist at Blind Ferret, but Looking for Group RPG is happening. It is in hand, and it looks gorgeous. We've got our new artist, our in-house artist, Aurélie Martin, who can ape Lar de Souza's style so convincingly that I challenge people to figure out which of the two chapter headers, when you get the product, which of the two chapter headers Lar designed and which of the rest of them Aurélie designed, because she has this was her trial by fire. Basically, as soon as she started working there, she was told, get to know Richard by drawing Richard 1,000,000 times for the LFG RPG.
Is there 1,000,000 Richards out there?
Not quite 1,000,000, but I am going to show off one of my favorites, because Aurélie is from France. She moved to Montreal because we speak French here for the most part, and then got a job at one of the most Anglo companies in Montreal.
Oh, goodness.
So I gave her my art order, and one of her questions was, c'est quoi Cthulhu-esque? What does Cthulhu-esque mean?
Oh.
So here the Warlock is a sorcerer archetype, and much like you choose bloodlines for your sorcerer, you would choose your pact for your Warlock. And so had Richard
a little
instead...
higher, Ryan.
Oh, a little higher? Really?
Yeah.
All right.
Your banner was cutting it off.
Oh, banner. So there we go. If you wanted aberration like Richard, a abyssal Richard, or a celestial Richard, those are some of your options.
That's very convincing.
So, yeah, I am so excited for this book. I amuse myself reading it over. I mean, it is still the Pathfinder role-playing game, but I dare anyone to put out a funnier version of the Pathfinder role-playing game rules than Looking for Group role-playing game, which will be out at GenCon, and if you are anywhere near the Blind Ferret booth, you're going to hear me running a demo, the name of which I don't feel is appropriate for the podcast, so we'll just call it the Richard Waving Contest. And I just want to give a final shout-out to GenCon, which just took place in Ottawa. It's run by Glenn Shackleton and Angus. It's run at one of the apparently many curling clubs in Ottawa, because we went to the wrong curling club when we were first trying to arrive there. But we had a couple of dozen tables running at throughout the whole day on Saturday when I went. I didn't stay for the Sunday games, but Pathfinder Society is really strong in Ontario, and it's particularly strong in Ottawa, which is impressive, because Ottawa may be our capital, but it is not one of our largest cities population-wise. But apparently it has a really strong population of Pathfinder Society enthusiasts, including there was at least a couple of tables of the confirmation that were being run for first-time Pathfinder Society players, a lot of which were teenagers and maybe even a little younger than teenagers, but anyway, in the double digits. So, yeah, GenCon was a good time. I got to run an Elven Entanglement for the Venture Officer of Ontario and the Venture Lieutenant of Toronto, and a good time was had by all.
All right, guys. Until next time, I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Parent.
And I'm Ryan Costello Jr., and if you want to find the path, you need no direction.